Well, Ilhan, thank you so much for helping my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Sure. First off, I was introduced to you through I think your niece, Shannon. So I'm happy to be here helping. I, um, I'm a copywriter and a marketer. I work with a software company who creates software for professional services companies, and I've worked with cloud computing and so forth. So that's my day job. I sort of summarize things and communicate them clearly to people for that business. And in my spare time, I've always been a fan of science, and let's say my favorite documentary series is Carl Sagan's personal voyage, Cosmos. So um, I don't know what else to share. People usually share their work and then their hobbies as their self descriptions. So I guess I like to do jujitsu as well in my spare time, and that's what comes to mind to answer your question.
That's awesome. So as a copywriter, you you have to figure out how to say complex things in very straightforward ways for people.
Yeah, a lot of times that's what it is. Right now, I'm actually doing a lot of technical writing as well. So it's explaining what something is, how it works, why you'd want to use it. If we're doing more content for the website or for the blog, then it's explaining the value of things and educating people. And then if it's pure copywriting, it's getting to the point of why somebody should care about a product, why it affects them directly, instead of just talking about the features and so forth. So Apple, for example, has been really good at this over the years. They don't say, so many gigabytes on the iPod. They'll say 1,000 songs in your pocket. And so it's something you can really connect to. And yeah, I'm thinking now, how is NASA doing this with their current program? Are they doing a good job? I haven't looked at it through that lens yet, but maybe you can tell me what you think about that as well.
Yeah, my mind was going the same way. And I guess kind of one way to judge that would be, did you know that we were planning to send humans to the moon in 2024?
I had heard about it briefly. I think there was some sort of news report that I had come across. I think that George Bush had made some plans back in the day. I didn't really believe it at the time, or maybe it was Obama. So I'd heard maybe one or two things about it here and there, but I expected that it would be the type of project that would be kind of an ambitious thing from a political side, but that maybe there wouldn't be enough funding, and then it would get delayed over and over again. And I suppose I was waiting to hear more before I got excited about it. And so having this interview with you, I did a bit more research, and it seems to be a thing that's really happening. I hope anyway. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions about the change in administration and kind of priorities and things like that, because the 2024
Yeah.
date was largely seen as being, at the very end of a second term of the current administration. And so, and then there's thoughts that would have been really pushing it too, as well. So 2024, maybe doubtful, but I think we're going to be back on the moon before the end of the decade for sure.
Okay. Well, that's good. Um, yeah. I guess part of me wonders, obviously Artemis is setting up the moon as sort of a practice zone or a waypoint to like a base to jump off on a larger mission to Mars down the line. They want to practice their techniques. They want to explore the lunar surface a bit more. They want a station around it. So in that sense, it's good. I know that some people on your website, you wrote that some people are saying, they feel a little bit bad about the moon getting defaced perhaps by having humans on there. And I also did have that initial feeling, what are they going to be doing there? Is it going to, but I'm sure it'll all be very worthwhile, whether they have stuff on the surface or whatnot. I don't see it being from the Earth, you seeing a real difference in how the moon looks, obviously. So, so long as it's not, so I guess because what you do on there stays unless if you clean it up, right? You want it to be neat and kind of respectful of that planet, whichever country is going there and setting their things down. It reminds me a little bit of maybe I don't want to go there, but the corporatization of space. Could it happen one day where things become very corporate and so forth. But I think we're a ways off from that. So
Yeah, I think a lot of it may come down to a personal judgment about whether or not humanity is a good thing or a bad thing. I think if people think humanity is a good thing, then seeing evidence of humanity on the moon would be sort of the sense of manifest destiny and going forth and conquering the universe and that type of thing. But I think there's a lot of people who don't think humans are good.
yeah, that's sort of the question, I guess. So I don't see it necessarily that way. I think that if we have a purpose on the moon and if it's worthwhile what we're doing, great. Maybe it's not even really an issue for me. I don't really see it that way, but um, I guess it would be interesting to see, what kind of structures would start to be, um, you know, set up on the moon. Um, if we started to have more of a presence there. And I'm sure it would simply be some scientific basis. I don't even know how long you could stay on the moon with such little gravity. I guess it wouldn't be so different than being in an orbiting station, right? You still have the same concerns with getting enough exercise and so forth to not lose bone density or muscle mass. And I guess it would be shorter trips as well. But I guess yeah, humanity, I don't, there's good and there's bad, right? So you always want to be looking towards the best examples of humanity and the best things that we've achieved. And I think that, our past moon missions were an example of that, just how we could um, master science and engineering and be able to achieve these things is quite a testament to our capabilities. Um, and similarly, all the benefits that technology has brought to people to improve our lives and reduce suffering in the world has also been a great example. And so I think I'm more on the positive side in that respect.
Yeah, and largely it's what we make of it. You know, it's not like a thing that happened be good or bad by itself. It'd be good or bad because of what we do with it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think that the eventual mission to Mars is exciting as well. I know Elon is pushing for that one, and yeah, I actually did. I think it was in grade 10 or 9, or maybe even 11, a science project in high school, where I sort of did a research project on what it would take to go to Mars. And you probably know this book. I leaned heavily on a book called The Case for Mars by Robert Zubrin. And I remember making a model. My dad helped, of course, making a model. My dad was a technical teacher in high school, so he had all the tools and he had all the techniques and so forth. So we worked on this model of a of a Mars lander and what it would look like based on some drawings in the book. And that was fun. It captured my imagination at the time. I was really excited by the possibility of humans going to Mars and exploring other planets. And I don't know for what reason, but I do admit that that enthusiasm has waned over the past. I mean, high school was when, like 15 years ago or so. So so maybe this project would be a way to rekindle that kind of excitement for people who haven't seen a lot of movement in the space in the area of space. I mean, recently we've seen a lot from Elon Musk and SpaceX and some other companies with their rockets. But since they had stopped doing missions with the space shuttle, and they had stopped with the Saturn rocket, Saturn V rocket, it didn't seem like there was much going on there. So it was hard to be excited about the future of humanity in space and visiting other planets and the moon or whatever it is. So I think that, as we see more about this, and as I see more, I'm going to be more and more excited by the possibilities. Potentially seeing humanity reach Mars in my lifetime would be amazing.
Yeah, I think you touched on something very important. It's like back during the Apollo era, progress was being made so quickly, people just thought that would continue. And then you had sort of like a 40-year period where it just kind of didn't go anywhere, literally. I mean, it just you're in low Earth orbit, you're doing experiments and free fall, weightlessness. Um, but you're not really exploring or pushing the physical boundaries of humanity. There's there's no space tourism, no space development. It's I think that really um, caused a lot of people's interest to kind of fade out.
Yeah, and I've always been a science fiction guy myself as well. I keep finding myself pulled back to science fiction movies and stories and explorations of what's possible. And when I was younger, I think there was more hopeful science fiction movies, right? Star Trek was very hopeful. I was into Star Trek. Um, and now you see a lot of, dystopian science fiction movies like Elysium or other movies. There's a lot of them, you know. Um, and I wonder if humanity on some level has lost its enthusiasm for technology and the good things that it can create for us, and it's become more afraid of progresses in technology, with surveillance or loss of freedoms or things like that. The risks that are posed from technology, and also the way that it's affecting our attention. You look at social media and how it's affecting public opinion and polarizing people, and nobody can agree on anything. And so when we think of technology today, we're thinking more in terms of uh, computer software and networks and the way these things are affecting us. But I think the aspect of technology where you're going to other planets is very exciting, and coming up with medical discoveries that help humanity and so forth. Look at how quickly we're seem to be putting together vaccines for the pandemic is really exciting as well. So, I mean, one of my books on my shelf is Carl Sagan's A Demon Haunted World, and I already mentioned I like this documentary, but when I read this book, it was a really great summary of the importance of science and the way that without science we tend to fall into superstition and irrational thinking, and we don't take advantage of all the developments we've made in science and critical thought over the years, over the past so many centuries. And so I'd like to see us more as a society move back to appreciating science and how do we discover things, and how do we know things are true, and um, how do we how do we gain the knowledge to be able to create things that improve our lives. There's always the people who have been working on it, but I'd like to see us as a society or a global society, maybe even appreciate those things more and appreciate the people who are in them and the efforts that are being made. And I want to frame that as positively as possible instead of the opposite. But yeah, I think there's a lot of value there for people. Um, for a long time, you know, I thought right now I'm in marketing. I'm in a software company. For a long time, I thought I was supposed to be in science in a way. I studied commerce. I studied science for a college degree for a couple of years after high school. In Quebec, we have that. It's called CJEP, and then went to university and did commerce. And I was missed out on science. So I actually went back in my 20s and attempted to do an undergraduate. It wasn't a good fit for me, so I went back to working in marketing. It, but there's always a part of me that appreciates that, and I don't know. It's to the point where maybe one day when I have more time, or when I'm retired or something, a friend's dad is doing this. I'll study physics or something like that on my spare time to appreciate it more. But yeah, I don't know if we hear a lot about it nowadays, and I'd like to hear more in the news.
And I wonder if our educational systems is a challenge with this as well. Um, you know, Science is about making observations about nature or something, trying to figure out what's really going on, proposing tests to be able to validate your theories or to disprove them or to choose between them. And then kind of like this iterative process of kind of refining your understanding. But in schools, oftentimes what's considered to be true is whatever answers are listed in the back of the book. right? I mean, or where you heard something from, like that whole how do you prove this is true seems like the fundamental part that that's driving like social media, because what's true is what most of the people that you're listening to are telling you is true, as opposed to truth being something um, that could be shared and experienced by all people equally.
Yeah, it's a lot of uh, there's a book. So when I went back to study in my 20s at university and took science courses, one of the courses I took was called was Psychology 180, I believe it was, critical thinking, biases, and illusions. So it was all about how it was a psychology course about how we come to conclusions about the world and how we can fool ourselves because of our inbuilt biases and the ways that we come to understand the truth. And one of the books that we read was Thinking Fast and Slow by, I think it was Daniel Kahneman, and he had a co-author as well. And the main idea of that book is that we have two ways of knowing things to be true, or two ways that we come to understand things as being true. And the first way is what he calls system one. And system one in our brains is kind of like a shorthand for explaining that we take the information that we have that is accessible, that we've been presented, and then without considering the fact that we might not have all the information, we might have skewed information, we'll come to a knee-jerk reaction, or we'll come to a quick conclusion about the state of things based on this limited information. And then that's very easy to do. That happens automatically. You don't even have to think about it. So this is where if you're exposed to a lot of similar reports about something, you start to believe it's true because you haven't seen any other evidence and you haven't taken time to think it through. What could be some other explanations. And then you have system two, which takes a lot of mental effort, but it's basically sitting down and considering all the different ways that you can look at a problem. What might you be missing? Using statistics that are counterintuitive to looking at the data, asking hard questions, examining your assumptions, and so forth. And that usually is the most useful way to come to the truth. And that's what science is all about, right? So somebody comes up with a conclusion, or at least a hypothesis or a theory, and then others are asking tough questions and putting it to the test to try to disprove it. And if it stands the test of time and it stands all these tests that are attempting to disprove it, you start to believe it as being more and more accurate. Anyway, I feel like this is something that even me in my own life, I'm trying to do more of, right? Not jump to conclusions based on the media that I read. Look at things from a different perspective, seek out other sources. And I think it's a really useful, but not a natural skill. You have to learn it. You have to learn first the importance of it. You have to be wrong enough times to say, hey, maybe my judgments were wrong in the past, so I have to look differently going forward. And you have to start to learn these mental models to examine your thoughts and do it as a habit. I have one friend who's very good with this. He studied physics as a master's, so he's a very good critical thinker for a lot of things. And I'll often go to him with something I've heard and ask him, what do you think about this? And he'll give me different ways to look at it. And so I guess bringing it back to the moon and these space missions, the more that we can appreciate science and what it's been able to achieve, because we're only able to achieve this through these critical thinking skills. The more we can use those maybe in our own lives and be less fooled by things we see on social media, or charlatans who are trying to sell us fake cures to things, or whatever other wasted efforts or wasted endeavors there are. It ends up being a lot of waste of energy if we're being led astray and we're acting on false models about the world. So I've always appreciated people who are pushing forward our understanding of truth, whether it's in space or on Earth, and also doing great things with them, like Elon Musk and others.
Yeah, Elon Musk is kind of a controversial figure though, because on one hand you have um, SpaceX and Tesla and the Boring Company and Neuralink and kind of like these real, there are no boundaries for moving forward. But on the other hand, he's received a lot of criticism for kind of his thoughts on the recent pandemic and um, coronavirus and things like that. I'm just curious in what your thoughts were on that. I've heard some people say, he needs to stick to his lane, what he's a specialist of, and not kind of use the credibility he's gotten from that to kind of create a public health challenge. And
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think a lot of times somebody is an expert at something, and then they step outside of their area of expertise and they start giving advice, or their thoughts on other things. Not to say that it's they shouldn't, but we should maybe take what they say with the knowledge that they're not experts in that field. Maybe they're very smart, but maybe they have some blind spots. Um, so I'm not one to condemn somebody as a whole because of some mistakes they've made or things they've said. I'm not sure exactly what he said about the pandemic. I know at one point that he said we should go back to work, and he went back to work at the Tesla factory with the other workers. I don't know how that turned out, but from what I understand, he went through with it. I haven't heard his thoughts more recently, but more generally speaking, yeah, he could be wrong about certain things, but I don't think that necessarily takes away from what he's been able to accomplish and put together with SpaceX and Tesla and other companies, of course, with a lot of help from other people and subsidies and so forth. But the fact that there's somebody out there holding a higher vision for what we can achieve as people, I think is a really valuable, um, I guess, thing to have. He becomes a really valuable person to have, as part of, you know, current humanity, the current group of humans on the earth, I guess. And yeah, I don't need somebody to be perfect to admire them. I think that Steve Jobs had a lot of flaws as well. Apparently, he was very mean to people and treated them poorly. And from what I understand, he didn't give a lot to charity, which some people are very upset about. But yeah, I still think he made a really great company and was really innovative and pushed personal computing forward. Whether you want to buy their products or you think they're overpriced, I'm a Mac user myself, and I appreciate what he was able to create with Apple. Um, so yeah, in that sense, people don't have to be perfect for them to make a really really valuable and appreciated contribution.
no, I totally agree with you. And I'm a big Elon Musk fan person. So
Okay,
don't mean to put that out there as
no, it's good
kind
good
of
to ask tough questions.
but some people look at what he's saying as being, maybe he's really trying to get to the truth. I mean, there's a kind of a party line that develops, and people who support that are given credibility, and people who question that are looked at as being like politically motivated or what have you. Choose whatever it is around, vaccines and around global climate change and around the pandemic and all that. I mean, you have groups of people that kind of say a specific thing, and they expect everybody else in their group to stick with that. And I mean, one thing is Elon Musk had COVID symptoms. He went to go get tested, had 4 tests done, 2 came back positive, 2 negative, and he's like, is it credible? I mean, um,
Question. Yeah,
yeah.
if it seems to be inconsistent, then which side do you believe, right? Um, yeah, no, I know there's a lot of debate going on with the pandemic and the best way to deal with it as a society, and where lockdowns are appropriate and where they're not. And I think those discussions should be happening. I don't think that it should be. Um, I think that we should be careful not to make the wrong choices, but I do think that we should have those discussions. And the fact that certain tech companies are censoring certain discussions and certain YouTube videos are being censored, I know there's a lot of nonsense out there that could lead people astray. But I also think that we need to be able to have these discussions in the open. so that when somebody sees the nonsense, they can also see people's commentary on it and why it should not be paid attention to. Because if not, it's just going to be seen as this is what they don't want you to know. Whoever's in control of these platforms or of the mainstream media or whatever, whoever's deciding what gets aired. And then maybe that'll be an incentive for people to say, hey, oh, this is the truth. They don't want us to know because it's the truth, right? That becomes a kind of heuristic by which to decide that something is true. If they're hiding it from you, if they don't want you to see it, that must be the truth. And that leads to kind of conspiratorial thinking. And better just to have things out in the open and be able to disprove them, I think, as much as possible. Or at least have a debate about them, right? So certain things shouldn't be closed, because like you were saying before, that's not how science works, right? It's not just what's the answer in the back of the textbook. It's a continual debate and discussion based on new evidence and new ways to look at things. So yeah, I think that's a valuable process for us to engage in as a society. And I wonder how much our education systems are maybe setting us up to, not setting us up to be able to have those discussions. Are we emphasizing scientific way of thinking for everybody, or is it only for the select few who decide to take science as an elective and pursue science in a university level, right? How much as a baseline do people get put onto science and get shown an appreciation for science and ways of thinking and looking at the world. So yeah, that's a big challenge for humankind going forward, I think, for us to be successful as a species.
Yeah, for sure. And even with the people that take science, they may not be learning the scientific thinking or method. I mean,
Sure.
if you're rotely learning about, you know, uh, electron orbits and chemical compounds and reactions and stuff, doesn't necessarily mean that you're developing that muscle of actually being able to observe, the world around you and come up with ideas and test those conclusions.
Yeah, that's true. You can have a blind spot. So some people sometimes have cognitive dissonance where they'll believe certain things in certain areas of their lives, and then they won't examine it with the same level of scrutiny as they would something that's more within their field of study or research or work. Yeah, that's definitely true. You see a lot of irrationality from, well, I mean, scientists can be irrational as well. And I guess that's why the scientific method has peer review and cross-examination of studies and so forth and things like that. So that nobody's one failing can be and it's also why there's I think a balance for expertise. If somebody is an expert in a field, to a large degree you should listen to them, because they know the ins and outs of it. They know the traps of thinking that a beginner might fall into. I'm thinking about climate change, for example, right? And so to a large degree, I don't have the skills to go and examine the data myself. So I have to listen to what the scientists are telling me. So to that extent, I think we should be able to rely on experts and trust them. To another, on the other hand, if the experts are proving themselves to be making mistakes over and over again, like for example, the CDC, I think early on with the pandemic, were recommending not to wear masks. Maybe that was political. Maybe that was because they were concerned about people hoarding masks and there wouldn't be enough for medical care professionals. But when there are mistakes like this, it becomes a little bit harder to trust the experts. And then I think you also have to allow always a little bit of room for the experts to be wrong. So what's the right balance as a non-expert to look at all this, right? So maybe the best is to veer towards the experts as a default, but then just to always leave a little bit of room for where they might be wrong. Keep an open mind about that. And the better you're equipped with scientific thinking and understandings about the world, maybe the better you are to do that. But again, it can be dangerous if you become too confident in your own points of view without having all the facts. So I don't know. It's something I think about a lot. I guess that's maybe why the conversation veered in this direction. But how do we know what's true? How do we make good decisions? How do we not get fooled? Um, and especially when there's a lot of lies and falsehood out there, how do you discern what's true?
Yeah, even when it becomes something as simple and basic as eating. I mean, a lot of people are saying you should really limit the time of day that you eat, and that fasting is good, and that, you know, um, kind of like this, what is it, an all kind of meat-based diet's good, and other people are saying that's horrible. It's just like something as
That's true.
basic as that is like
So,
hard to find
yeah,
consensus.
that's something I've heard a lot as well. That the fact that we can't come to a conclusion about what's the best diet or what's optimal in terms of eating is, is kind of shocking with all the scientific tools that we have available to us. And some people seem to be reporting great results with veganism. Others seem to be vegans and they don't look very healthy. And others are, like you said, on carnivore diet where they're only eating meat and they seem to be healthy. But is that good long term? Who knows? And then have different studies on different diets around the world and lifespans and quality of life and so forth. So yeah, it's hard to know what's right. And I think a lot of times you can fall into certain camps online, or maybe you fall into the vegan camp, or you fall into the paleolithic paleo diet, right, or whatever it is. And then you just sort of you get some confirmation bias where everybody in that group uh, shares the information that supports their point of view, and maybe you don't hear a lot of critical thinking in those groups. So I guess there's a challenge of how do you share opposing viewpoints when people tend to group together into communities based on their beliefs and their preferences and um, their predispositions towards what kind of sources they'll believe. I think it's a problem that social networks are struggling with today. You see Twitter now putting little warnings underneath tweets saying this is disputed, which seems smart. But then what if what if there is a valid point that's being shared and then it's being disputed? Then then is it then is it a good thing or not? Maybe you have to take the good with the bad. It's hard to find the right balance.
Are you
Maybe it's not.
inadvertently giving support to everything you're not labeling? The fact that you didn't label it may mean that it's not controversial.
Yeah, that's true too. That's also true. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's a tough problem to solve, and I think it becomes more and more important as we. I mean, I keep coming back to Carl Sagan, but when he came out with this book, The Demon Haunted World, he had an interview on the Charlie Rose show at the time, and he was saying how we're such a technological species, and yet we're still so caught up in superstition and things like that that it makes you wonder about how we'll be able to handle all this power going forward, whether it's nuclear weapons or whether it's I don't know, genetic engineering or whatever the next potentially hugely impactful technology is. Are we going to have the tools as a society to make, or AI even, are we going to have the tools as a society to make good choices about it? And he expressed a lot of doubt about the direction we were going in. And it seems that a lot of his concerns, which were in the early 90s or the mid 90s, played out. And we seem even worse off in a lot of ways, as far as I'm concerned, with our collective understanding of the world, because we have so many different sources. And at least we used to have certain gatekeepers, whether they were telling us completely the truth or not. There was a consistency there, but now there seems to be a lot of chaos in our collective understanding.
How do you see that changing?
I don't know. Maybe better education from an early age, right? Better appreciation for critical thinking. If everybody took a course like the one I took at university when I went back, I think we'd all be better off. If maybe we need social networks that show us both sides for any article, or show us, or vet sources better, or things like that. So I don't really have the answers, but it's there's a book called The Infinite Game that my my boss recently recommended as one of the company books that we base our philosophy on at the company I'm working on. And the idea is that it's a game that we always have to keep playing. It's not, we can't, there's no endpoint. It's something we always have to strive for. Kind of like the way that police keep order, right? There's never going to be criminal. There's never not going to be thieves and murderers and so forth. Unfortunately, so you're always going to need people there to keep those elements in check. And the same way we need to be vigilant with our thinking and our understanding of the world and how we're educating people and the tools that we all have. So I hope that these moon missions and hopefully Mars missions will get kids excited again about science. I'm sure a lot are excited, but I think that when probably in the 60s when these missions and 70s when these missions were happening to the moon, I'm sure a lot of young engineers were their imaginations were captured. A lot of teachers, a lot of scientists looked at these missions and were in awe at what we could do, and that probably directed them towards science or engineering as a course of study. So I really think it's a great thing, you know, to have these things going, just to push humanity forward, to hold an image of what we're capable of. And yeah, I think that, you know, there could be a lot of advancements that come out of it as well, technologically. And I know that when the Apollo missions were happening, I think when Apollo 11 happened, or the day that humans landed on the moon, I think that the New York Times had, similar to what you're doing here, they interviewed people for their thoughts. You know, are you pro these moon missions, or are you against them? And there were a lot of people who, like me, were saying it's a great thing for humanity to push forward and to explore, and you know, will capture our imaginations and get us excited about science and what we can achieve. And then there were others who were concerned about all the money being spent and whether it would be better spent, you know, feeding the poor or helping people in need when we hadn't solved problems on Earth. So, you know, my first reaction to that was, you know, what do you mean? Like, of course it's a good idea to go to the moon, but if you do think about it, that there is somewhat of a point there as well. So maybe it doesn't have to be an either or thing. Maybe we can see it in terms of, look, these missions will help get more people into science, will help us create more discoveries, will help us to raise the quality of life for humans as a whole. So it doesn't have to be necessarily an either or. We can do both, and they can both help in different ways. You know, maybe it's a bit of a scarcity mentality to think that we only have so many resources to go on projects, and we have to be so conservative that we don't explore and push technology forward and push our achievements forward. So basically, I hear the other point of view, but I'm not sure I'm convinced. You know, I appreciate it, and I still think that we need to push forward. And I don't know, you know, past Mars, what is next? You know, what could be next? You know, going to further planets in our solar system. You see shows like sci-fi shows like The Expanse, which is often touted as, like, nowadays touted as being one of the most realistic, I guess, sci-fi shows, simply because, I guess, of all the politics involved and how there might be different groups of humans depending on where they were in the solar system and kind of the political struggles that would go on there. But it does make you wonder what things could look like in a few hundred years if we continue on this path. It could be interesting to be spread out across the solar system in different ways. And I think one of the reasons that Elon Musk is pushing so much for us to get to Mars is just to diversify our home. You know, ideally we don't want to mess up the Earth. It would be obviously pretty much the end of life as we know it. But maybe in the long run for humanity, we need to diversify and also find a second home. It's good to have two instead of one. But it would take a lot of effort to terraform it and so forth. Is it possible? Is it practical? What would it be like living on such low gravity compared to Earth? yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I've my original plan is to interview people at the coffee shops and the stores on the streets and what have you, random everyday people. And I did that from December of last year to the middle of March, and then we had the pandemic lockdown, had to start scheduling everything on Zoom. And um, a lot of people came up with, that as an objection about opportunity cost. Why aren't we taking care of global climate change and poverty and social justice and a whole bunch of other issues that need to be taken care of. But I think as you probe into those issues, you really find out that they're not mutually exclusive, and to do one doesn't keep you from doing the other. And if you don't do one, doesn't necessarily mean that those resources are going to be devoted to the other. And you know, one thing that occurred to me is I think there's a lot of misconceptions on how much resources relative to everything else that NASA gets. Like for example, this year I think NASA's budget is going to be something like $23 billion, which sounds like a huge amount, right? But the military budget, $760 billion, right? And the total US budget, I think aside from the Corona relief thing, it's like around, $2 trillion. So, this
Yeah,
is like a fraction of a percent is actually going to this purpose. So even if you're eliminated, it's not like you have these all these resources available. And in some ways, maybe the fact that people think that so much money is being spent on it that's actually not might actually mean we're getting a lot of value from it.
yeah, it seems like a great bang for your buck, right? So I don't know. It's it seems reasonable to me to have these programs, and I was always disappointed younger when I was younger, and that they weren't putting more money into it. Whenever I heard that NASA didn't have the budget to pursue X project or Y project, it was kind of disappointing. So, especially in light of how much money is being spent on the military or, um, money printing for the relief projects and so forth. It seems like there could be more money. But then again, you have to ask, is it, then there's the question, is it the government's place to be pushing us forward in this way with taxpayer money, or is it, should it be, should it be private industry who does it for profit motive or whatever it is? And I don't know. I'm personally okay with my tax dollars going towards it, but yeah, that's I guess a debate to have as
Well,
well.
and then the other option is a combination of the two, where the government's setting out prizes and paying for services, and the private sector is actually creating the capacity and competing against each other to deliver that.
Yeah, so a combination approach.
Like services to the International Space Station used to, the space shuttle would deliver all the cargo, and then they had a contest to see, um, could there be private delivery services to the International Space Station, and we ended up with two, Cygnus and SpaceX, and now it looks like they're adding, a couple more, and then the same thing with astronauts. You can you have private companies capable of sending astronauts to the International Space Station. Um, you and I could go.
Yeah,
We just have to, save some box tops and stuff. That'd be good.
box tops, save enough money. You're saying?
Yeah, enough
Yeah,
money. I got clips of
yeah,
coupons.
yeah, exactly.
Start a
Well,
GoFundMe type
yeah, pretty
page.
much.
Yeah,
Well, that's a goal, right? Get to age 65 and be able to go up in space if you're still healthy enough or whatever. Save up
I
the money.
know that's it's a shame to have the money but not to have the health, and it's a
Yeah,
shame to have the health but not the money. Like, oh,
yeah, exactly. It's kind of the the way that people driving fancy cars tend to always be older, right? Because they've made their money and now they can drive they can afford the car. So
but
yeah,
if anybody needs autonomous cars, that would be a group.
the older people,
Yeah.
autonomous. Yeah, that's yeah. I guess that's another topic, but man, it seems scary to get in a car without having your hands on the wheel. But yeah,
Uh,
what do you have other questions that you like to ask about the moon mission and
oh,
so forth?
if it was safe and affordable, would you go to space?
Oh, for sure, I would. But it's funny, when I was younger, when I was much younger, like a kid, I remember having a fear of one day going into space and floating off and not being able to see my parents again, or or whatever it was, sort of a maybe I had the nightmare once, or maybe I just imagined it and it scared me. But yeah, I think I would trust the engineers enough to go up and do it. I think it would be a great experience. Um, yeah, for sure. Even if it's just to orbit the Earth, you could take these flights where they do free fall drops, or I don't know if that really counts. I'd want to be on a space station permanently orbiting for a while, but yeah, I'd do it.
Yeah,
I don't know if
my
I'd go to Mars though. Yeah.
my sons and I took the zero G flight actually, so we got to experience the weightlessness at
How
30
was it?
seconds at a time. It was really amazing. I was really scared about people say it feels like falling, or you're really afraid of maybe throwing up or something. After all, the NASA one was called the vomit comet,
Okay.
but it actually didn't feel bad at all. Nobody on our flight had any issues, and just you just feel free. I mean, I'm like doing flips, and I don't even know I'm doing flips. There's no sense of down. So it was really nice. It's really short-lived though. 30 seconds passes really quick.
Hmm.
Um, so we got to do 15 parabolas. The first one was with Martian gravity, so like 1/3 gravity. The next two were like moon gravity, which is like 1/6, 1/7. And then the remaining 12 were in free fall and weightlessness. So you got to float and everything. I got to
Oh,
tell you,
nice.
the partial gravity caused me the most uncomfort. It's like you're like feeling the sense of gravity, but it's like not right. So
Hmm.
I think in some respects maybe there might be some adjustment to being on the moon at 1/7 gravity.
I went skydiving once, tandem, right? So I had an expert on my back pulling the cord, but which is great because he's incentivized not to make a mistake, right? Um, but yeah, I don't know if it's similar. Have you ever gone skydiving, and is it similar at all? And you never
I
did?
have not. I have not. I'm kind of scared of heights, which is kind of funny. I'm also taking private pilot lessons in like a little Cessna. Somehow being contained in a place doesn't make me scared, but like being open above does.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
um, I keep talking about doing skydiving, but um, that would be a big growth moment for me. I don't know if I could do
Yeah.
that.
I think what helped was I read the statistics, and there was something you'd have to look them up yourself to know for sure, but it seemed that the occasional skydiving was much less risky than driving your car a normal amount for the duration of your life. It was like a fraction of the risk of death than driving a car. So um, I looked at those statistics, and it helped a little bit when I went up. And the fact that these guys are experts, and they're doing it multiple times a day for years at a time. They must know what they're doing. So
I, otherwise, the ones that don't get weeded out really quick.
yeah, exactly. It's not a long career,
No
unfortunately.
longer.
Yeah.
Um, well, I really appreciate your time. Is there anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
Um, no, I think that pretty much covers it. I guess there's more to learn. There's more to pay attention to. Um, and yeah, I hope this is something that brings us together uh, as humanity, and inspires us. And you know that maybe we can look at the moon and say, hey, there's people up there. That'll be exciting to know that we're up there, because right now I think that space seems very abstract as a concept, right? It's out there. You can look at it with the telescope. You can look up at the stars. On some level that we're a planet orbiting a star, orbiting the center of a galaxy. And there are many galaxies, but it's, I guess, once you realize that we're out there, that you can reach out and touch the objects that are in space, not touch space itself, but touch um, the other bodies. It brings it closer to us, and it becomes more real and tangible. So I think it'll change the way we look at the moon again, and hopefully Mars, and other planets in our solar system. There'll be actual places that we can go, instead of just these things that are out there floating around that are nice to look at, but but don't fully seem real. So something to
Yeah,
look forward to.
yeah, exactly. And I don't think it's that long away. I think within by the 2030s, we'll be like everyday experiences, like having video conferences across the world without even, thinking about the technology required to do so or cost or anything. It's just
Yeah,
amazing.
I hope so. Thanks
Well,
for interviewing me and asking my thoughts. Thank you for doing this.
well, thank you so much, and you have a good rest of your day. And if you know anybody else, I got so many more days to go.
Okay, I'll put the word out.
I appreciate it. Okay,
Take
take
care.
care.
Bye.